All right, everybody, welcome to HubSpot Partner Tracks 2023. We're super pumped, super excited. We've got a 3-hour event for you, so please hang on for the panel discussions. Those are going to be super actionable. The partner tracks, of course, a little bit of speed networking or take a bathroom break if you're not into the speed networking, and then some giveaways at the end. But right now, we want to set the tone. We want to give you some insider knowledge. We want to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, the guy that kind of sits between the buyers, the end customers of HubSpot, the HubSpot users, and the solutions providers and networks and interacts and knows a little bit more, I would say, or maybe a different perspective than some of the partner managers inside of HubSpot. So you go to them for certain things. Maybe you have access to Max. Maybe you listen to his podcast. Maybe you just follow him on LinkedIn. But Max, if they don't know you, how do you introduce yourself to people?
Well, hey, Alex, thank you for having me. Hey, everybody. My name is Max. I am a senior solutions engineer over at HubSpot. I've been at HubSpot for around 7 years now. Just hit 7 years in December, I believe. But yeah, basically my job at HubSpot, I've had a bunch of different roles from, customer onboarding to new employee onboarding on the learning and development team. But today, my current role as a solutions engineer, essentially, I'm here for strategic deal support for our direct sales reps in our mid-market segment. So a lot of the times, what happens is when reps are working deals, they'll generally bring me on if there's any sort of like tough conversations from a technical perspective, if there's some sort of solution to a problem that they can't really wrap their heads around. All the way if they just, all the way to, like something as simple as if they just want to have someone to like lean on for any sort of questions as they're like crafting out a final solution for customers. So we're talking a lot about integrations, whether you're connecting some sort of internal system that you have, or you need to build an integration with an existing tool that's out there. When it gets really wild and technical, we're the ones that kind of step in and really help make sure that we can be an advocate for not only the sales rep and HubSpot, but for the customer as well, and to make sure they're getting the right solution for them and there's no surprises when they actually close, right? So that's my role. It looks very different every day, which is really cool. But a lot of the times when we're working these deals, a big part of our job is figuring out, hey, given what someone wants to accomplish, you're probably going to need a partner for it. Right. Or maybe you're going to use HubSpot services, right? We have other folks that kind of really help us with a lot of like the deeper like details of those discussions. But, oftentimes whenever we have a customer scoping out a solution, it's often involving a partner and we have to make a compelling case of why and help them make like a good decision around that. So, yeah.
I love it. I was pretty excited when you said yes to this because I knew it was a necessary part of the conversation. We're going to hear from the partner track providers, the actual tech partners, the integration partners. We're going to hear from some agencies, some top digital agencies, inbound and RevOps. And we're going to hear from some partner managers. But what I needed for all of you participants, registrations, RSVPs, attendees, I needed somebody that could really tell you exactly what's going on at the very top of the funnel, meaning I'm exploring HubSpot, I'm in a buying conversation, and who am I? What am I actually looking to get done and buy first with HubSpot? Typically what happens is they'll come in with a need and then the agency will take them down different strategic paths. But I want to know who is buying and what are they buying? So let's start with that. Let's spend about 10 to 15 minutes on this. Sure. Who is buying and what are the top services and what are the trends?
Yeah. So, again, I've been at HubSpot for 7 years, right? So when I first started, right, we were still very much known as a marketing tool, right? The marketing hub, which is like the marketing element, this whole HubSpot CRM thing, was the product that HubSpot kind of grew up on, right? So the conversation there when it came to partners was, we would have customers, maybe they'd have a marketing team, maybe they wouldn't have a marketing team, right? But either way, they didn't either have like the bandwidth or the skill set or just like the time or resources to be able to actually build an inbound marketing strategy on HubSpot, right? And that is still the case today. Like there's still plenty of customers that, will follow this like do inbound for me sort of like methodology around like trying to select which partner to kind of work with them, because we have plenty of people that still approach HubSpot to primarily use it as a marketing tool, even though today we lead and present ourselves and identify as a CRM tool, right? But as that shift kind of, happened over the years, where like we led as an inbound marketing tool and then kind of morphed and evolved into being a CRM first and foremost, today what you're seeing people approach HubSpot for, if not just as much, maybe a little bit more at times, maybe it kind of like balances between the two, is you're generally seeing people approach HubSpot as like, hey, we actually need a CRM, right? Marketing might not be the giant priority right now, but we know that like our internal operations and our sales process is a mess, either because we don't have the right technology in place, or we have the wrong technology in place, or we have too much technology in place and we're having a hard time like stringing it all together, or adoption is a really big issue with our sales reps, right? So people are really, most of my conversations today are really kind of like going into this, idea of like approaching the CRM at first, right? So typically what you're seeing people start with generally is like the CRM and the sales hub, right? So you can think of the CRM as like the entire platform, but then they buy into this like sales hub module generally before kind of looking at something like marketing hub, service hub, sales hub, service hub, ops, CMS, things like that, right? So that's like the general big thing. And in terms of like who it is, right? Most of the time, we're usually seeing like sales operations or like sales leadership or like revenue operations folks, for example, kind of approaching this like CRM conversation where they want to have a central record of truth for their sales team, right? More and more, you're starting to see service be a big part of the conversation at the beginning, right? And then, on the marketing side, you're typically seeing like marketers, marketing operations people, things like that, and they're leading more of like a marketing hub type discussion. But like in terms of like where partners are really kind of coming into that, is like a lot of the times they're coming from older systems that have a ton of historical data, and they need to be able to bring that over, right? And from HubSpot's side, like we do have services that like we can provide, right? Like, we have our onboarding, which is helping you to, get you up and running on the tool, get you trained on the tool, make sure you have the right sort of strategic guidance to deploy it in the right way. But whenever you're thinking of like HubSpot services, it's more of a do it with me approach versus a do it for me approach, right? So when you start to talk about things like, hey, we've got this old CRM that we're using, or this other CRM that we're using, or this internal system that we've been relying on over the years, right? What we're typically like, recommending when it comes to the partner side of things is like having someone that can work with you, get into the nitty gritty, and come up with a really good plan to migrate all of that information into HubSpot. Now, there are tools and apps and things like that will do that. Some partners even build them, right? But depending on like how complex that is, like typically it makes a lot more sense to actually work with a third party that can just handle that migration for you, right? So that's like, a big thing that we generally start to see. Cool. So that's like, generally who it is, right? You're either starting off with like some sort of marketer or some sort of marketing ops person, right? For the marketing side. But then when it comes to the CRM or the sales side, it's like sales leadership, rev ops, some sort of combination of that. Cause again, that looks like a little bit different for everybody. Right. But it's usually kind of like in those realms. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was chatting you some things that came up while you were talking. So first couple you answered the biggest deals. So you're mid-market, you're seeing pretty big deals. Maybe those can kind of roll up to enterprise at some level, but the biggest deals, where do they start? Sounds like they start with a migration that involves a lot of data to CRM.
Yep. Yeah, and in terms of like the biggest ones that I would say probably for like the partners, right, is when there's like, and when you start talking about bigger companies, ones that have been around for a while, ones that have like internal systems that they still rely on, right? A big part of HubSpot is being able to like give your team like a delightful, easy place that's easy to adopt, and like, a system that's like not life draining to spend your time in, right? But an important thing, if you have these outside systems that have information in them that you rely on, right? You want to make sure you can access that within HubSpot and not have to spend the time going through a bunch of different tools, right? So in terms of like some of the bigger deals that you're going to see for like partners, a lot of that's going to involve like integrations with those homegrown systems that allow you to either surface data in HubSpot, report on data in HubSpot, manipulate information in other systems from within the HubSpot UI. And we see a lot of partners doing really cool things with these things called custom cards. If you're a HubSpot partner and you're doing custom integrations and you haven't looked into the idea of custom cards in your CRM yet, this is a really, big area that you want to focus on, because it essentially allows you to bring data from other systems into HubSpot so it can be seen, manipulated, things like that, without having to actually store it in your HubSpot data structure, right? So a silly example here is like, let's say, for example, you have some outside inventory system, right? HubSpot doesn't do any inventory stuff, at least out of the box, right? What we've seen a lot of people do, for example, is like say, oh, when a sales rep is working a deal and they have line items and things that they're going to sell, you could have like a custom card built on the right-hand side of a deal record that shows information about inventory from another system, right? And that's great because that sales rep doesn't have to leave HubSpot and check it somewhere else, but you're building these experiences into HubSpot, right? So partners play a huge role in that for our customers, because they don't necessarily, like a manufacturing company probably isn't going to have software developers like readily available to them, right? And that's, a huge gap that like a lot of partners can fill.
I love this. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Before we go into our next session, let's go rally off some keywords that you hear in these buying conversations.
Yep.
That typically is when a service provider is time. It's time for a service provider.
Yeah.
I've listed out some there. Read off the ones there that are relevant that you have heard that if you're a service provider listening, what we want you to do, write these down and have a plan to put them on your service page if you are capable of executing the service. But
yeah,
read any of those.
Let's go through these, right? So like custom cards. Here's the thing. A customer's never going to say custom cards, right? Because they're not going to be familiar with that concept, right? But this is like totally something where I'm always recommending a partner comes in if they don't have developer resources, right? But this is how you build in those like custom experiences and custom functionality like into records. A lot of times when you see integrations from third parties, they'll add these little cards to records to like give a little more functionality to that integration or surface some more info, right? But this really kind of comes down to custom integrations, right? I'm almost always immediately, my little partner flag just shoots right up whenever I hear someone say custom integration, and I know they don't have dev resources available, right? So that's going to be a huge one, right? Is building integrations with other systems when an integration doesn't already exist yet, or when an existing integration with another tool doesn't work the way out of the box that you want it to, right? That's another place where we'll see partners coming in and saying like, oh, you don't quite like the way the Salesforce integration works? Well, let's go ahead and we can use the APIs to kind of like build something custom for you, right? Data cleansing and data migration is also like a huge one too, right? A lot of companies that we work with don't have the time to go through all of their historical data and clean everything and make sure they're not bringing over everything, anything old that they don't want to bring over, things like that. So like having someone who can not only migrate the data, but ensure the data coming into HubSpot is actually going to be clean and relevant and useful and set up for the way that you're planning on using reporting in HubSpot, for example. Like that is a huge, area of value that partners can bring into play, right? ERPs, you have ERP integrations here, which is also like a really, really big one. And this is interesting too, because I'm seeing a lot of partners that actually like specialize in building ERP integrations, right? A big one that you see right now is Bayer Bradford, right? They have this whole data warehouse.io platform that they've built, which really helps with a lot of like integrations with ERP systems. They also kind of position themselves as one that like a partner that specializes in working with like manufacturing firms, things like that too, as well. And a lot of that has to do with how you're migrating with an ERP. So they've kind of carved out like a really cool, at least piece of their niche there, right? But yeah, like again, data migrations, right? Because again, we're not going to migrate data for you. We can advise you on how to do that here at HubSpot, but like if you need someone to do the heavy lifting, partner, we can advise you on potential integrations you can build, but we're definitely not going to build it for you, right? So like partners are huge in that. And then like cleaning your data, anything that has to do with like doing the work itself, right? Partners are always going to be the best ones to kind of fill that gap.
Yeah, and we're talking a lot of back end stuff here, so I do want to scratch the back of some of the front end
Yeah.
solutions providers, but more on the traffic driving and conversions inbound side of things. So think about that for a sec. But what I like to think about from a marketing standpoint is like, how can I set myself up to get these deals and to be the right solutions partner for the referral? And then we're going to talk about how you network your way into HubSpot ecosystem so that you can be top of mind when somebody is dealing with this situation and one of these buzzwords come up. So let's talk about the top 5 big ecosystems, not small integration app, but like they're coming from this ecosystem and they need HubSpot to work with it in some way. And that is where they need an expert. So talk about those 4 that I just mentioned, but any maybe bigger than those 4.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Salesforce is a big one, right? Now, like HubSpot has a fantastic integration with Salesforce, right? It works really well. You can plug and play. It's usually 90% of the time it's exactly what everybody needs, right? That being said, there are some funny Salesforce accounts out there, right? It's an extremely customizable system that can do so many things beyond just CRMs. And sometimes, depending on how your data structure is set up, it could be like a little weird in terms of the way that like how you're integrating it with HubSpot. 90% of the time when people are using like leads, contacts, opportunities, like account, objects, things like that, like the basic integration is going to work for you. But there are certain situations where it becomes more complicated. I've worked with plenty of customers that have multiple Salesforce instances. I've worked with plenty of customers that have a lot of sensitive data inside of Salesforce they want to make sure doesn't come over, right? And sometimes what you have to end up doing is either deploying some sort of like outside sort of iPaaS system to manage an integration, like especially if you have like 2 Salesforce instances, right? So there's a couple really cool tools out there that like will allow you to kind of add this additional sort of central layer or single layer of truth sort of iPaaS syncing system. Syncery is a really good example of that, right? So sometimes again the Salesforce integrations can get more complicated. One thing that we always recommend a partner with when it comes to Salesforce is if we're doing anything like a Salesforce selective sync, which is a way of just having a way more specific window of data within a Salesforce org that only HubSpot can see. But when you do that, there are like some complexities that do kind of enter when you're setting it up that way, right? So while we have that integration with Salesforce, it's not uncommon that we'll like bring partners in the more like complicated situations like that. When you talk about things like NetSuite, our integration with NetSuite is getting better and better and better. But again, NetSuite can have a whole lot of complex functionalities on the back end that like the native integration isn't going to solve for, right? But at the end of the day, HubSpot's got a full set of APIs that'll let you pull in and out and edit and delete data in any sort of way you need to, and so does NetSuite. So a lot of the times we'll see people like building integrations that have to do with like inventory or sales orders or invoice information, right, between HubSpot and NetSuite, things like that. So deeper integrations with NetSuite that go beyond like basic object and like attribute property syncing, right? We'll typically recommend partners for that. And oftentimes with NetSuite too, you are seeing like a lot of manufacturing companies, right? The other complexity that kind of gets added there is like sometimes our quoting tool can't get as complex as companies like that need. So we'll typically recommend deploying some sort of solution like using any of that functionality that might already exist in NetSuite, or a tool that like layers on top of HubSpot to add more functionality to quoting, like Glean Quote or DealHub.io, things like that. And when you're starting to string together like multiple services like this, it's always good to have a partner come in and kind of build that solution for you, lay out how they're going to do it. We see that a lot with NetSuite. Snowflake is one that like I don't come across a whole ton unless we're talking about like Operations Hub Enterprise. If any partners out there aren't familiar with Operations Hub, that's like our suite of tools that really help get your data right within HubSpot. And part of the enterprise version of that is an integration that we have with Snowflake, which is like a data warehouse service, right? So that'll basically take all your HubSpot data, make it available inside of Snowflake. But again, there are more custom ways to do that, right? Like you can do that with our APIs. And often if customers don't have their own developers to set up those connections, right, we'll rely on customers to actually build those API connections, whatever middleware is needed to get that information into Snowflake and vice versa, right? If you got to get information from Snowflake into HubSpot, our native integration is a one-way push out of HubSpot, right? So you might rely on a developer to do something like that or a partner to do something like that. Yeah.
Let me just give you a breather for 2 seconds. I'm chatting Max, just all these like, talk about this, all the stuff in chat. So you've been nailing everything. This is really cool. So we're going to get into the latter part of our discussion about suggestions, what to do now. Let's go here. Yes. Let's do this. And let's get into that. So we talked about one, niching down. Yeah. Niching down does not mean passing up on revenue opportunities. It means getting deeper, expanding more in the area of the tech stack, as well as the vertical, the industry, the segment that you are known for, or hopefully want to be known for, and getting bigger opportunities in that segment and being the agency, the solutions partner that's top of mind for all the others that aren't in that vertical, as well as a person like Max. He can say, oh, that agency is big in manufacturing. They know this system. They've done it 100 times. That is my referral. I have no question about it. Talk about niching down.
Yeah. Okay. So to kind of frame this conversation up, right, we have to kind of like approach the reality of things in that this whole idea of the flywheel, the need to attract, engage, and delight, is like a pretty sort of like general framework that can apply to almost any business or organization, right? Everyone has to do those three things in one way, shape, or form. So the thing is like HubSpot, you can give me literally any business, and HubSpot's going to have a use case in a way it can help and provide value, right? However, not all customers or people who are new to HubSpot know that, right? So it's really important for them that when they're approaching HubSpot or approaching inbound, right, the strategy, right, they need some assurances that like this software or this way of doing business would work for my industry, right? Because what they know is their industry. They don't know a lot of like the frameworks that we talk about in our universe all the time, right? So a really helpful thing for me when I'm positioning working with a partner is when I can find partner companies or you know, our services consultants can find partner companies. When we can find partner agencies that have proven their proficiency in certain verticals, that's always like a really big trust factor for customers who are looking for someone to work with, right? So if I'm working with a nonprofit, because nonprofits can use HubSpot, they have to attract, engage, and delight. There's plenty of use cases for it, right? When we're talking to nonprofits, it really helps for them to know if we're recommending a partner that has proven that they've been able to successfully help other nonprofits like them, they're going to be much more likely to go with a company like that versus just some general, like, you know, HubSpot, like generalist provider, right? Now, am I saying you have to bend your entire partner agency's persona and vibe and like positioning statement and mission statement around a certain vertical? No, you can be a generalist so you can kind of, you know, appeal to any sort of, you know, company out there. Because again, any company can use HubSpot. You don't want to like position yourself out of opportunities, but you do want to be able to, at least through your marketing or through your positioning, be able to prove in certain verticals, we've handled that before. We can deliver XYZ. We have a unique approach to it, right? So like there's some companies like Inbound FinTech, for example. They focus primarily on companies using HubSpot and doing inbound in the financial services industry, right? I talked about Bayer Bradford before. They have whole parts of their website dedicated to how they're serving manufacturing companies, things like that. You know, so being able to say, hey, yeah, we can do HubSpot for anybody, but we're really, really good at like these 1, 2, 3, 4, you know, however many you really want to focus on and do it well, right? That's going to be something that really helps you stand out amongst other HubSpot partners, right? So, you know, niching down is important if you're kind of staying in this sort of like generalist area that might be hurting you, right? So think about how you can like prove your proficiency in certain verticals to really kind of stand out and be top of mind for those reps that are just like, oh, I've worked with these guys before. They're really good at food service industries or like something like that, right? And that's always going to feel really good for the prospect on the other side. Yeah.
I got a curveball for you. This wasn't originally planned, but what are your thoughts on productizing your services? Meaning, good example is I've got a typical HubSpot migration, Salesforce to HubSpot. It's pretty cookie cutter for the most part, with the exception of some things that could change. I'm going to put a pricing page, service page, but I'm going to put a pricing, typical SaaS pricing. Maybe it's a one-time project. Maybe it's a retainer, but I'm going to put a price tag on it. I'm going to put bullet points. I'm going to call it something. From your seat, from your role, you're talking to a new potential sale, trying to get them over the line, trying to help with that sale, facilitate it. Is there a benefit for the solutions partners that you know of to have something like that, a pricing page on their website that mentions a specific service to make it easy for you to refer? Does that change things? Looking at Penguin Strategies right now, pricing pages here. They do a credit system, very unique, I think. I don't see a lot of this, but they crush it, so it's working. Your thoughts, Max?
Yes, this is crucial because you don't want to just rely on hoping customers get into a nuanced conversation about potential services they might need when they're deep in a sales process, right? There are plenty of people out here, and this is why inbound works, right? There's plenty of people out there that are doing the majority of the research they can before they actually get into a sales conversation, right? And you can't just be relying on someone like me or a sales rep or something doing like a ton of discovery and then finding like the specific sort of nuanced services that they might offload to a partner versus doing with HubSpot, right? So if you are a partner and you have specific like services that you provide, like turning them, productizing them is the word that you kind of just said here, making it very easy to understand. This is a service we provide. Why might you need this service? And here's the desired outcome that you're going to get from it. And here is clear and transparent pricing is great, because then you don't have to rely on them to go through the sales process with HubSpot and hope they get into that nuanced conversation about why you might use a partner, why not, right? So like if you're providing training, right? Who's the training going to be good for? Why would they buy it? What does the deliverable look like? What's the pricing, right? Do you need a custom integration to be built? Do you need to migrate and clean your data, right? Like what are specific things? Because a lot of these companies don't know what services they need until they uncover a potential roadblock that someone like me figures out, right? So if you can kind of educate folks on, hey, what are some of the very clear-cut, obvious reasons why you might hire us, right? This is one of the best ways to do it. The last thing you want is a giant page with a bunch of corporate jargon on it that has a contact us form on it, right? Like that's not going to get you anywhere. So productizing like your actual services, making them very clean cut, giving a menu, right? That's easy for people who are coming into this space for the first time to understand. And folks that aren't familiar with the HubSpot world is going to be huge for you. Absolutely.
Oh, that was perfect. That's exactly what I wanted. So we're still talking about suggestions from Max Cohen here. We only have a few minutes left, but let's do networking. I think this is a super important one.
Yeah.
So you're a solutions partner within HubSpot. Maybe you're a founder and you've got a team that you need to instruct on how to get more out of the HubSpot ecosystem. Networking is one of the best things you can do. Yeah, I'm a CEO of an agency. What do you tell me? How do I get the most out of the HubSpot ecosystem? Where do I go? What do I do in each property?
For sure. Okay. One lesser known thing in terms of like who to network with, right? At HubSpot, at least, that I don't think a lot of like partners are super familiar with yet, because it's a fairly new role, are these things called solutions consultants. Okay. So at HubSpot, you have your sales rep that sells you HubSpot, right? You have someone like me, your solutions engineer, that can come in and have the really hard technical conversations and make things easy, right? But then we have folks called solutions consultants. What these people come in and do is they work with the customer, like sort of towards the mid to tail end of the buying process, when we start talking about things like onboarding, deployment, timelines, budget, additional services, things like that to say, okay, you've talked to your sales rep, they've uncovered the need. You've talked to a solutions engineer to say, can this use case work? Right? Now, how are we going to do it? How are we going to deliver on it? Right? And what these folks do is they ask tons of questions and they work with the customer to figure out how much work they want to do on their own, right? What sort of bandwidth and resources that they have, what their budget is, what timelines they're under, things like that, right? And through that conversation, they are going to put together a series of suggestions in terms of the services that they purchase through HubSpot and services that might need to be done through a HubSpot solutions partner, right? And they'll be able to say, hey, listen, you should probably have a partner actually deploy this for you, right? Because you need a lot more hands-on work past what like basic onboarding is going to do. Or, hey, you should do the basic onboarding through HubSpot, right? And then have this partner build out this custom integration for you, right? But it goes past just like saying, oh, you should use a partner. What they'll do is they'll understand the budgets, they'll understand the timelines, they'll understand what's important for you in terms of working with a partner, and then they'll go out into the network of partners and find folks that they think are a good match, right? So you can find those people on LinkedIn. It's really not hard. Just look for people who are HubSpot solutions consultants, and you're able to kind of like, you can network with them, get to know them, like see what information you can give to them to make it easier for them to understand what you do, right? But they're also really good at kind of like learning a ton about the partners and understanding the nuances about them and what customers they work well with, which ones they don't, things like that. So those people are good. Did you have something, Alex? Sorry, I don't know if you just raised your hand.
Yeah, I'm going to make it a little bit easier. I got a Boolean search in LinkedIn for HubSpot solutions and then advertising, marketing, and related services.
Perfect.
So check out that. We're going to have all these below this video in the notes area in the course. So if you're watching this live, ask Melissa or myself for a link to the course, and then we'll have the published course with the notes below, just FYI.
Cool. Yeah. To kind of continue on the networking piece, right? If you're new to the HubSpot community, right? Or even if you've been a partner, but you haven't really like explored a lot of these other spaces, there's a couple other like things that I would say look into for very specific reasons, right? So in terms of like that whole conversation we had about like niching down and like finding your space within the partner world, right? In terms of like who you serve best and like who you're going to make the case to prove that you serve best, right? The HubSpot partner directory is great because you can go into there and you can see how all the top HubSpot agencies are like positioning themselves, right? And how are they kind of stating the services they provide, who they best serve, how they like to work with folks, what services they have, things like that, right? And that can kind of help you craft your story a little bit. The HubSpot community forums are also great because you will see customers and partner agencies alike talking about different gaps that they're seeing in the HubSpot product, right? The reason that's really important is because a very exciting thing that I think is going on in the horizon for HubSpot partners is partners who are building apps on HubSpot, right? That's different than like an integration between a third-party tool and HubSpot. I'm talking about apps that actually add net new functionality to the HubSpot tool and solve problems that the current, HubSpot features don't yet solve for. You're seeing this a lot with companies like Aptitude 8. They build a ton of apps that are literally just like adding workflow actions or custom functionality into HubSpot, right? You're seeing this with companies like New Breed, right? New Breed is a really long-standing, super successful HubSpot customer. They just started building apps that help you do things like, way more complex lead distribution and like sales rep, sales motivation and like leaderboards and stuff like that. They're building apps on HubSpot and they're carving out these cool little like micro SaaS companies on the HubSpot platform, right? Not integrating it with something else. You're seeing Zebra as a good example here, where they took an integration between HubSpot and Stripe, and then they ended up building the integration that should have always been, right? So like, if there's some integrations out there that already exist that like aren't that great, go ahead and build the best version of it, right? That's another really great opportunity for partners out there. And then past that, like take a look at the HubSpot app marketplace, right? See what other people are building. Go read reviews on current integrations. If there's one you think you can build better, or you have some sort of use case that HubSpot integrations on the app marketplace aren't already solving for, that's a really great opportunity for you to build something, right? And that whole idea of like building apps on HubSpot, sure, great. It's another great like revenue opportunity for you too. But in terms of also like positioning yourself for those customers that like need someone to build custom integrations with like internal systems or other tools, that's also a great way to prove that you have the chops to do that, right? And on top of that, you can take those systems that you have and build them into your existing solutions that you're providing for your customers already, right? So yeah, I know we kind of like went from networking to like what's also exciting, but it's all related. You know what I mean? So
All related.
yes.
Well, the good thing is we actually have a panel with the CEO of A8 Labs, which is Aptitude 8's product development company. I was also showing, that's later on, definitely
Yep.
chime in for that. And I was showing Remington's Impulse Creative landing page on his HubSpot apps and integrations as well.
Yeah.
All of the top agencies, or not all, most of the top HubSpot agencies are going this direction. That is a big suggestion. Along with networking inside of HubSpot within the solutions partner network. These people are some of the nicest people in any partner ecosystem I've ever met. You can
Our community is wild.
It's
Yeah.
so crazy. It's
Yeah.
super
Yep.
unique. And then let's talk about last two things here. Last thing here, if I'm looking to get my team in the best position to accept this type of new work that we're talking about in 2023 and even 2024, what types of roles are you seeing pop up from these agencies? Who are they hiring and how are they structuring their team? Anything on that? And then we'll end.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that I've kind of really seen, and it might have even like become a lot more popular, even in just the time that I've worked at pre-sales in HubSpot, is you've sort of seen the whole like concept of like the solutions consultant and the solutions architect kind of explode onto the HubSpot scene, at least. Like these roles have kind of existed in like, you know, other networks that have been around for a long time. Like you see these all the time in Salesforce, obviously, because like you need a full-time staff of people to like run big giant Salesforce accounts, right? But in the HubSpot world, you were kind of really like HubSpot could be run by the teams using it, right? But now as you start to see us moving up market, right, and you start to see more larger and complex companies using HubSpot, right, and integrating with a lot of different stuff, I think you're starting to see a lot of agencies kind of bring on people who are sort of playing the same role that I'm playing, which is like that pre-sales or maybe even post-sales, because, you know, depending on how big your sales organization is within your agency, or you know how big your headcount is and what you have resources for, you know, you might not have like a dedicated pre-sales like solutions architect or solutions engineer, right? But you know, you might, right? But some person who can play the role of being able to like exist in a sales process and drive really good conversations and simplify things, but also speak to more technical prospects, right? Solutions engineer, solutions architect, whatever you call it, right? Someone that can really add that extra like technical layer to your existing sales folks, but also can help with how like your team is actually deploying this stuff post sale and ensuring it's lining up with what the expectations were. So there's that. You're also seeing partners as they move more from, because partners used to be like, we have a lot of really, really good marketing folks that can help you with inbound marketing. And then when people started to like adopt our CMS more, right, and do more on the Marketing Hub, we were hiring a lot of front-end web developers to build websites and things like that. Now, when you're starting to see this more RevOps motion, systems motion, back-end business brain folks buying HubSpot, you're starting to have the need for more partner agencies that are really just focused on custom development on HubSpot, not just from like a front-end website perspective, but back-end, ensuring like internal systems are talking to HubSpot, the tools are being developed inside of HubSpot that are needed that don't come out of the box, things like that. So like you're starting to see folks like hire a lot more web developers. Now, I'm not a web developer by any means, right? But, you know, people who can write custom coded actions inside of HubSpot, right? So folks who know Node.js, Python, things like that, folks that can help you build like configuration layers like behind HubSpot that are you know, serving as like a middleware between another system in HubSpot, things like that. You know, folks who are comfortable developing like with the context of it being within a CRM, right? You know, so developers, but also those more technical sales resources, right? that are able to kind of like assist sales folks through those deeper conversations and kind of coordinate with everyone else who's delivering the services in the back end. But partners come in all shapes and sizes. Your customers come in all shapes and sizes. Your sales process comes in all shapes and sizes, right? So those specific roles might look a little bit different for everybody, and that's okay, right? You got to kind of figure out who am I trying to serve and what sort of army do I need to build on the back end to be able to go to market for those folks.
I love that. Yeah, I think we've all seen the roles posted for a engineer, developer, app developer. Those have been big. I've seen a lot of those. And then we get into, I think I've seen a lot of solution specific roles come up. Like I need a blank expert in to join the team. And those are people that maybe have worked internally at like Stripe on some level on the solution consulting or the sales side, but more of a tech consulting because that agency wants to get deeper in the Stripe ecosystem. Yeah. And you need someone that has a ton of experience.
Yeah. And to even go off that, it's like a lot of the times sort of like the strategic resources you were providing when you were really just doing the marketing side of things, the strategic resources you need to be providing now, like beyond the people who are just doing the, technical integrations and setting everything up, those would be like RevOps experts that like really understand how to build a really good revenue operations engine, not just focusing on like the marketing side of things, right? So from a strategic standpoint, those folks that you hire to strategically advise these companies that are paying you to provide this service, that's kind of like another big thing you're seeing hiring versus just inbound marketing experts, right? So keep an eye out for those folks.
And elephant in the room, partner managers, partner marketing, partner.
Yes.
Partner.
Yes, especially if you're like deploying a lot of other solutions that work with HubSpot, right? Like, again, Connor at Aptitude 8 is a perfect example, right? Like there's they realize tons of customers are using Stripe, tons of customers are using HubSpot, right? Through their partnership with Stripe and through their partnership with HubSpot, there was obviously like a natural need to build this integration. And like a lot of that stuff comes from like really good management with all the other partners you're working with. So I'm sure he can tell the story better than I can. That's what I saw from an outside perspective, at least.
Well, Max, we'll do the summary. We don't need to go down the list, but some incredible advice from you to these teams and these agencies and the people that are getting involved or trying to just get more out of the HubSpot ecosystem. I'm so glad that you were able to have this time and spend the time. And we're 15 minutes over, but the last 15 minutes were super valuable. So hopefully everyone appreciates that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. It was awesome.
All right, buddy. We'll see you online. Enjoy the first panel discussion with Jen Spencer and Nathan Paris. These two are selling tons of services in the HubSpot ecosystem, and we're going to find out what is going on, what you need to know about setting up your agency to provide the right services, as well as a nice beat on things going on now, and bring your questions. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Max. We'll take care, buddy. See you online.
Thank you.